can I ask you a question back? And he said, sure. I said, have you ever evicted a family onto the street? And he said, no. And I think that's what people have to understand is evicting a person on the street, you have to do it. They're not paying rent. It could be because it's a lifestyle issue and they're causing havoc on the property. You're still disrupting a family, disrupting a person. You should feel.
All right, we're hot. So Norman, we met up, and I think back several years ago, we met for coffee here in Chastain. I think at Chastain, if I'm not mistaken.
Outside.
Outside, that's right. And moving to Atlanta, I didn't know a lot of folks, and so I look up to you as someone who has an incredible track record in investing, but also a great mentor. You've managed billions of dollars of assets. You have acquired, disposed of assets. You've been through a lot of cycles. What's maybe some of the best investing advice you've ever received?
I can't say it's advice I received, but advice I learned the hard way.
Yeah.
And my advice to myself, and now I'm giving this advice, actually trying to teach this to private equity out there and investors out there as we're entering a new cycle, that don't follow the herd. At the end of the day, if you go to Africa, you follow a herd, you stampede a herd, it runs off a cliff and they'll all die.
Yeah.
And so sometimes it's the bison or the animal that strays from the herd that survives and then thrives. And so don't follow the herd. Today, all equity is looking for Class A, core, stabilized assets. And maybe they'll go down to the late 1990s, but it has to have that stabilized, a moniker to it.
Yeah.
And that's driving down cap rates to sub-5 cap rates, sometimes 4.5 cap rates. Interest rates are 5.25 or more, and that's if you can get a fixed rate loan at high enough leverage to make sense. And so you're starting with a negative arbitrage. And the argument is, well, rents are going to go up, and we'll claw that back and get the positive territory. And that's great, but that's a lot of rent growth, and that's a lot of speculation as well. And you don't know what exit caps will be like today. But if you go downstream to the B and C assets, there you're seeing 6, 7, and even 8 caps. And if you're borrowing at 5 or 5.25, you're getting a very positive arbitrage. And so that's what I think the action is going to be. I also think that's where you're going to see more rent growth sooner, because no one built any properties to compete with those properties. Everyone competed with the core deal next to them. They built another core deal.
Yep.
So I think you'll have more competition there for a longer period of time. At the end of the day, working people, they don't have an alternative. So they're renters, not just by choice, but they're renters by necessity. And so for many reasons, I think that's a great place to be if you can buy it at those kind of cap rates. What's happening is that raising equity for that today is very difficult because everyone's following the herd.
Sure.
And so I learned, don't follow the herd, follow your own gut, your own instinct, and go where people aren't going.
Okay.
Because you'll be, they'll figure it out later, and they're going to come and follow you.
So what animal on the African safari, what is RADCO? Are you a lion? Are you a gazelle? Are you a alligator? Tell me what you all are. And why.
Oh my gosh, I haven't thought of myself as a metaphor for an
For
African
speed.
Elephant. I like the cheetah.
Yeah.
Because the cheetah acts alone.
Okay.
They actually don't get along in the sandbox well with each other, and so they hunt alone. They also are the fastest animal, and they can't kill you with their claws. They actually, their fangs they kill you by knocking you down. And they knock you down, and then they take advantage of you once you're on the ground. So while we don't take advantage of people, we try not to. Very often in the distressed business, you're looking at properties that are on the ground, that have been knocked down, and they need to be lifted up. And I think, maybe, that's the cheetah, maybe the better metaphor. I don't like any of them, but I'm thinking about the cheetah when I was in Africa. That was an animal that really impressed me.
Also, as you mentioned, the herd, and you're thinking about all these different types of properties that are out there, right? There's hundreds of thousands, if not millions out there, and there's infinite deals people can look at. How many deals are you looking at and your team looking at before you find the right fit for RADCO?
Well, in the last cycle, I would say we looked at about 50 deals for every deal that we bought.
Okay.
In this cycle, we're looking at those same 50 deals and we're buying 1/10 of a deal. So maybe this year we'll have bought 2 deals, and maybe if we're lucky, we'll get a third in the fourth quarter, but we'll have looked at 600 to do that. And this market is a very strange market. It reminds me of 2010 and 11. Everyone knew where values were going or where they should be,
Yeah.
but nobody wanted to be the first to recognize that. So there was sort of a stare down between potential buyers and sellers and who was going to blink first. And I knew that the sellers would have to blink back in 2010 and 11, and they did. I think that's what's happening right now. And so you're seeing actually one of the lowest number of deals transacting this year than you've seen probably since 2011 or so. It's very low. And the percentage of deals that are on the market that trade, the brokers may tell you that it's 50% are trading, which is, by the way, very low historically.
Yeah.
But I really think it's more like 80% are not trading today.
And that's of deals that are on the market?
That's right.
Okay, because people could put it on the market and then take it off the market.
That's
put it
right.
back on, right.
That's right.
You see those
And some of it was because the brokers they didn't know where the market was.
Sure.
The brokers looked at what the last trade was. So if the last trade was a year ago, you'd say, okay, that this is how the market should value it. They don't know what the market's going to do until it doesn't. And so they may have sold a price to a potential seller that got them excited, and they went and spent the time to put on the market, didn't get close to that price, and therefore didn't trade. Other times, sellers today are just looking for a market valuation, then going back either to a lender or to a partner to do some kind of recap of the deal based on the market value. So they wasted a lot of time of a lot of people, and there wasn't a transaction as well. Also, we're now seeing many deals that are going in the market by sponsors that are receiving bids below either the loan amount or the pref equity or the mezzanine equity, some other stack in the deck, and so they're no longer making the decision. So now it falls to the next level or the level below that in the stack to make that decision, and all of a sudden they weren't ready to make that decision because they didn't know they had that problem. So they've been slow to react as well, so then the deals don't trade. So we're seeing for all those reasons, we're not seeing a lot of deals trade today. If they are, it's not for lack of equity. There's plenty of equity for very specific types of deals, as I mentioned before. Class A core, stabilized, even 2000s vintage. It's in a good location. There's tons of equity that bid that up. You've got 30 or 40 bids, but get something that's has high delinquency, deferred maintenance, lower occupancy, is not stable, and those buyers and that equity just sort of fades away. And so that's the kind of path that's what we're looking for, built for handling those kind of problems. And it's a bonus that fewer equity groups are willing to tackle these problems. And so we sort of have that field a little bit more to ourselves.
You were a founder and CEO. And to a lot of people, that's very glamorous, right? The investing life and making decisions, but it's not all it's cracked up to be, right? You're making a lot of tough decisions. You're not buying as many properties as you're looking at. You're having to find the right talent. What's something that most people don't understand as being a founder and being a CEO that maybe something you've learned that isn't well it's cracked up to be, and maybe the most important things about being a CEO?
Well, I had 2 analysts in 2017. I remember this, working for a very big private equity shop in New York, and they were considering buying into our company or buying our company and all our assets. And we'd done all the tours, we had a data room, and they had all the information. And then one analyst sent 60 questions at 11 at night to us. And the next morning, the other analyst, who sat right next to him, sent us 80 questions. 40 of them were about the same questions as the first analyst. But instead of spending the time working as a team, coming up with a list, they just helter-skelter threw these questions at us. And one question really struck me. And the question was, what is the ROI on a Magnolia tree? And the reason was, part of our business plan, was to plant magnolia trees along the road from the entrance to the leasing office to create an emotional experience. We call it the critical path, the whole sales path. You want to have a great entrance, a great drive to the leasing center, and then whatever the path was to your model unit, it would also be pristine.
Sure.
And that creates the emotional experience. And I explained that to the analyst. And he said, no, 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 no. There's got to be an ROI for a magnolia tree versus an oak tree. And I said, well, the name of the property is called Magnolia Terrace. And he just didn't get it. There still had to be an ROI for it.
Yeah.
And that really struck me. And then I got to the next question, and the next question, and the next question. And I finally said, can I ask you a question back? And he said, sure. I said, have you ever evicted a family onto the street? And he said, no. I said, have you ever had to struggle on a Wednesday to make payroll on a Friday? And he said, no. And I said, when you've done both, call me back. You can ask any question you want.
Yeah.
And I think that's what people have to understand is evicting a person on the street, you have to do it. They're not paying rent. It could be because it's a lifestyle issue and they're causing havoc on the property. But you're still disrupting a family or disrupting a person, and you should feel it. And the second is making a payroll. And I worry, and I think you may ask me a question later about the advice I was given, but when I was small and starting out, I didn't hire people for two reasons. One, I didn't know if anyone could do it the way I could do it, and I did it, which, by the way, I learned was not necessarily the best way. Very often it was, but sometimes it wasn't, and I didn't realize that then. But the second is, I was responsible for them. That they had a family, they had a career, they had a future. And what happens if I had to close shop in a year? What if I sold the Four Seasons and that was it, and I retired, or I went back and took a regular job and left that person in the lurch? I agonize over those things every single night when I go to sleep. Even this weekend, a beautiful Labor Day weekend, I sat worrying about some of my employees. And so that's something that, makes me go gray a little earlier than not, because I'm responsible for every single person who works with me. And I take their loyalty to me very personally. And not something that should be written off. Well, it's a right to work state. Oh, well, they knew what they were getting into. I see so many companies do that, and it offends me. And I think a lot of that causes some of the social unrest we see today. It makes the government step in and require more regulation, because I'll tell you that my father told me something I didn't understand at the time. It was in the 1970s. I was in law school, and he said that he disagreed with accountants that an employee's salary should be an expense on the profit and loss statement. He said instead it should be your most valuable asset on your balance sheet, that your employees are your value. And I think at RADCO that's absolutely true.
Tell me more about that. As you think about people you've probably hired hundreds of people over the years, maybe more, maybe thousands, and your teams have hired people. What are the most important things that stand out to you that someone needs to have? What are some of the traits, no matter what role they're in? Is it trust? Is it communication? Is it awareness? What are the things you look for?
Yeah, so there are many things. Passion is incredibly important to me.
Yeah.
You can teach technical skills. Adrian was talking to me offline before about his expertise in teaching, engineering and maintenance to hundreds of people that in his past life.
Yeah.
And you can teach that if you have the passion for it. But there's a second trait that to me is incredibly important, and you mentioned half of it. You said awareness.
Yeah.
I call it self-awareness. Are you aware you're not doing a good job, or you have a weakness? And if you think you're doing a great job when you think you're struggling, having to convince you're struggling and need help is so painful and time-consuming and probably doomed to failure that it's not worth the effort. We should separate. But if you're having issues, there are things that you can do better, but you're self-aware and then have the passion to want to get better, then you're my employee for life. In fact, today, One of my employees celebrated her 22nd anniversary with us.
Amazing.
Yeah. So
Like 22nd.
Yeah.
Wow, 22
Laura
years.
Lee. Hey, Laura Lee.
All right. Now, is she in the corporate office? She out in the field?
She's in the corporate office. She's
Right.
now head of our treasury department.
Amazing.
She started as an admin,
Yeah.
making I think $10 an hour,
Wow.
and helping my administrative assistant just run errands and things like that. And she was making $10 an hour. Then became an admin. Then became the head of HR. She didn't like that job. The part about having to say no to people and managing people,
Sure.
all that's cracked up to be necessarily. And so she moved into accounting and has been in that for about 10, 12 years and moved up to treasury now. So she's loyal. I trust her implicitly, and she's an incredible person to boot.
Love that. I have so much about awareness, communication, coachability. I've seen CEOs who might be really smart, as you said, maybe ever never had to deal with payroll. They're educated or MIT, but they're not coachable. They don't have the self-awareness. How important is being a great athlete? And you think of Kobe Bryant, Michael Jordan, Stetson Bennett. These athletes have had great coaches. How important is that, having a great coach and being coachable?
Well, I think the greatest example of this is Nolan Ryan. Nolan Ryan was one of my favorite pitchers growing up.
Yeah.
And he came on board when Tom Seaver was also pitching
Yeah.
for the New York Mets. And no one had radar guns then.
Yeah.
But even at the end of his career in his 40s, he was clocked at 104 miles an hour. There's some that say he threw at 114 miles an hour. Jerry Grody, who was the catcher for the New York Mets at the time, broke his hand in the first game that he caught of Nolan Ryan because the gloves were not designed to catch a ball
No
that was
padding.
thrown
Yeah.
that fast. They had to redesign the glove just for Nolan Ryan. But the Mets traded him after 2 years because he struck out 18 people, but he walked 20. And he would lose a lot of ball games because he was wild. And they traded him, I think, to the Los Angeles Angels. And the Angels saw I think Nolan Ryan said this in his biography. They saw the opportunity with him, wanted to improve, and they spent the time hiring coaches to sit down with him, examine everything that he did. And this is before they had AI and 43 analysts on the team. This is when seat of the pants.
Yep.
People use their innate experience, improve things. They didn't have all these tools that we have today. And they sat and they worked with him to get control of his fastball and develop a curveball so he'd have an off-speed pitch. And he became probably the greatest pitcher of all time. And so more shutouts than anybody, more strikeouts than anybody. I mean, until he was like 43 or 44. Absolutely extraordinary. And the Mets just didn't invest the time and energy and resources to help guide him and make him a better player. And if they had, New York probably would have won many, many more World Series than they did.
Interesting.
And that's why I'm a Braves fan today.
All right.